Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for DC 2050 Comprehensive Plan. This is our introductory meeting. We're happy that you all have chosen to join us this evening for a very informative work session. So we will be starting in just a couple of minutes. So make yourselves comfortable. Again, welcome everyone. We will be starting in about 1 minute. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. As participants continue entering the webinar, please take a moment to fill out a very short demographic survey. You'll find that in the chat. This helps OP understand who we're reaching through our engagement efforts with the goal of reaching participants that reflect the district's diversity. We'd also like to share some helpful tips for participating in today's webinar. If you've joined by computer or Zoom app, you can ask questions in the Q&A box. That Q&A box is at the lower part of your screen. To access ASL interpretation, find the interpretation icon in the toolbar, and that's also at the bottom of your screen. Click the Watch option and choose an ASL channel. Okay, so to start us off this evening, it is my pleasure to introduce our director, Anita Cozart. Anita?
Thank you, Deborah. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening, everyone. My name is Anita Cozart. I'm the director of OP and really delighted to welcome you to this, our first virtual and online webinar related to DC 2050, but our third kickoff meeting. We've been having a wonderful time really engaging with DC residents over the past couple of days, talking about DC 2050, which is our comprehensive plan rewrite. And this is our first rewrite since 2006, and we see this as an important roadmap for the city's future growth. Over the next 2 years, we'll be working with you, residents, community-based organizations, businesses, elected officials, to develop a plan that really is going to guide us into 2050 related to how we build new housing, create jobs, connect neighborhoods, preserve our history, and invest in our public spaces. These are all the kinds of elements that we want to have for both current residents and future residents to make sure that we are able to achieve our goals around affordable living, world-class amenities, all that are needed to support a thriving city. We certainly have challenges ahead, and we also have opportunities. And the DC 2050 is going to allow us to really seize on those opportunities and have some important conversations about the challenges we face and solicit some ideas about how we meet those challenges. Our residents are key voices in our city, and the feedback that we receive through this process is going to be essential to us. And we know that for many, these are really uncertain and also for many trying times. And it's important for you all to stay in active dialogue with OP throughout this process. And we want to hear both the concerns and the aspirations that you have for our city. And so I want to thank you in advance for joining us today. I want to thank you for listening to the content that we have to share, but also for your active participation in some of the activities that we have in store for you ahead during this agenda. I really want to give kudos and thank our terrific Office of Planning team who has been engaging and will continue to engage and are excited to jump in with you right now. So with that, thank you. Please keep engaging with us throughout this process. Share the questions that you have about the process and about what DC 2050 is going to be. But also, we want to hear your ideas and vision. And our team is going to talk to you about how you can share that with us. So, with that, I want to turn it. I'm not sure if I'm turning it back over to Debbie or if I'm turning it to another one of our wonderful team.
I think I'll take it from there, Director. Thank you so much. So my name is Nick Kushner. I'm the project manager for DC 2050. And this meeting is going to be exciting for all of us. Hopefully you're as excited as we are to engage with you tonight. This is going to be a virtual take on what we have done in person over the last few days, which is an open house format. So we're going to engage you around some boards using a digital whiteboard software that we'll introduce you to in this introductory section of the meeting tonight. We're first going to walk through all of the boards with you, kind of provide some of the data context that we'll be going over, and then we are going to break out into, and then we're going to give you a full tutorial of the overall digital whiteboard, and then break out into smaller group discussions where we can actually fill out with stickies and dots and do the board exercises in this digital space. So with that, I think I'm going to jump in. I'm going to take over the screen share from Alex, and I'm going to jump right into the platform that we will be using for tonight, which is called Mural. Some of you may be familiar with that. If not, no worries. We will go through how this operates and works. How this initial part is going to work is I'm going to provide a quick overview of the one of the stations, which we'll talk through, the overview station. Then I'll hand it off to my colleague Ryan, who will talk about housing. And after each station, we'll have time for just a couple Q&A questions. So if you have questions as we're going through, please put those into the chat. We'll be able to answer a couple real time in this main room to provide clarity or answer some pressing questions on the data presented. And then we can get into more discussion in the breakout rooms as we go through the boards in more depth. So just starting out, we are going to address this engagement board once we get into the breakout rooms more and hear more from you. We're here to talk about DC 2050, which is the district's next comprehensive plan. I'm going to go into presentation mode so you can see it a little bit more clearly. This is just the start of this process. DC 2050 will guide the long-term vision for the district in what we build and where we build, what can be built where within the city. It guides the form, the density, and the use of the buildings that are built in the district and shape the future of our city and how we grow collectively as the District of Columbia. The district is required by our home rule charter to produce a comprehensive plan. Those have typically been done about on a 20-year cycle. And this is the third iteration of a comprehensive plan since DC acquired home rule. So we did a plan in 1984 was the first release. Our current plan was actually first completed in 2006. Some of you may have been involved in 2021 when we did an update to that plan. But this is the third iteration, DC 2050, which will be starting from that last update as a foundation, but will be a new plan with a new framework and a structure that we design together as we go through our engagement process. So one thing that we're doing with DC 2050 is we're being really intentional about centering equity and racial equity in particular as we go through our planning process, both in looking at the outcomes from the land use policies and decisions we make, and also in how we engage residents throughout this process. So to center equity, we need to talk about how we got here. That means we need to acknowledge the unjust history of land use policy within the district. DC sits on the land, the ancestral land of the Anacostan people. It's a city that had legalized enslavement till 1862. Enslaved labor was significant in being used for the construction of the White House and the U.S. Capitol, so these beacons of freedom. And as we get into the 1900s, we see the birth of urban planning as a profession. We see the DC's first zoning act passed in 1920. Throughout those early decades of the 1900s, there were a number of land use policies that played a significant role in contributing to the racial inequities that we still see across our city today. Openly racist policies such as redlining and racial covenants prevented where Black and brown people could live, prevented where different religions could live, and restricted housing to only certain people in certain parts of the city. Policies such as the Alley Dwelling Act of 1934 and urban renewal from the 50s, 60s, and 70s uprooted vibrant, diverse, and Black communities, displaced residents, separated them from neighbors, and kind of obliterated these vibrant communities that were there before. Today, we know that many residents still feel the fear of displacement and the angst of that, and the stressors that come with that, and that have had family members that have been impacted, might have been personally impacted, and that's a big concern coming into this plan. And so that's why OP is really centering racial equity as we go through this planning process. And we'll be developing an anti-displacement strategy as we go through this process that will be released at a later stage as we get into the engagement this fall. So with that, I can go to the next slide. This slide is just showing a comparison from the Federal Housing Administration, which was central to the practice of redlining in the 1930s. Areas that you see in red on the map on the left were areas that were deemed unsafe for investment, mortgage investment, insurance investment, communities that were disfavored for getting any kind of home loans. And those, as you can see with the map on the right, is showing areas where there is the most racial concentration by census tract, with the darker green being Black, racially concentrated Black communities, and the darker blue being racially concentrated white communities. And you can see that discrepancy still existing to today from that redlined map from the 1930s. So the thrust of what we are trying to break through our policies in this plan has been something that's been very lasting for many decades. And so it's going to take all of us to come up with the strategies that can combat that. And we also wanted to give you a little taste of where we are today as a city and where we have grown since the last comprehensive plan. So the district is now home to over 700,000 residents. We are anticipating through our COG forecast projections, adding 145,000 additional residents by 2050. That means we need to find ways to accommodate that growth. If you look at the trend through the charts in the lower left, the district's Black population has decreased from 2006, which is when we, as I mentioned earlier, completed the last comprehensive plan, and its share of white residents and other races and ethnicities has increased. Since that time, the overall median age has also decreased, so it means residents have trended slightly younger that have been coming into the district, with almost a quarter of our overall residents being in the ages between 25 and 34. And then finally, the map on the right shows growth that's been absorbed by different wards. So if you look, Ward 5 and Ward 6 have absorbed the most growth in those last 20 years. And other parts of the city, particularly in Ward 3, there's been much less growth absorption in that time. So as we think about the future of the city and how we're going to accommodate 145,000 additional residents, we need to think about where that growth can occur, where how we're structuring our land use policy so that that isn't overburdening certain communities as opposed to others. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to Ryan, who is going to walk us through the housing affordability boards.
Thank you, Nick. Hi, everybody.
Hey,
I'm
Ryan.
Ryan.
Ryan,
Ryan,
be sure to put yourself in presentation view.
and just to add to what Debbie said, maybe if there's a way to just, if we can get any more zoomed in on some of these maps and just orient people a little bit. Not everybody's got a big screen.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Ryan Hand. I'm the Associate Director for Citywide Planning, and I'm going to talk a little bit about housing affordability. You're going to see all these boards again in our breakout, so if you're having a little bit of trouble reading them, you'll be able to take a closer look when we go into the next section of the event. What I want to talk a little bit about is housing, what housing is like in the district today. Housing can be difficult to afford for many households. That's a reality that many of us face. DC is working to make it easier for all households to find a home they can afford. We're starting by identifying the places in the district where residents are most likely to be burdened by housing cost. And that's what we're seeing in the bottom left-hand chart, as well as some later information we're going to talk about. Burdened households spend more than 30% of their income on housing, which makes it difficult to pay for housing and other necessities like healthcare. And you can see from the bar chart below, the Black households are more likely than other races and ethnicities to be cost burdened by housing. White residents are less likely, and other racial and ethnic groups fall in between. The maps in the middle show housing costs. The one on the left shows rent, and what that shows that rents are highest near downtown and to the west of Rock Creek Park, and in many cases, rents are a little bit lower east of the Anacostia River. Home ownership is especially high, pricey west of Rock Creek Park. Pretty similar throughout a lot of the rest of the city, and it's distinctly less expensive to buy a house east of the Anacostia River. Can we have the next slide, please? So housing diversity is also really important. As we go through life, we need different kinds of homes, and that's what we're talking about here. We want to provide different housing choices that help us carry from when we're young, when folks have children, larger families, and as we get older in life. What we're seeing in the bottom left is a chart that shows where our homes are, what types of buildings our homes are in today. And what you can see is that most ownership housing is in single family homes. These homes are maybe expensive. These homes are typically expensive. And we're going to have some conversations about how to create some more lower cost opportunities to create more access to home ownership. In addition to that, most rental housing is in large apartments. That's what we're seeing on the right side of the bar charts in green. And in the middle are smaller types of housing. And there's a little bit less. They're still very common in the district. And we're going to be exploring how to add more choices for housing so that more residents can find the homes that meet their needs at prices they can afford. And that means having enough bedrooms and at a price you can afford. And that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about through this planning process. And the last map that we see here is where the district's dedicated affordable housing is located. That's housing that has a subsidy specifically attached to it. And what this map shows is that most of the district's affordable housing is concentrated in wards 7 and 8. And it's also distributed throughout the district, but it's notable that that we do have a lot of dedicated affordable housing in wards 7 and 8. Can we please have the next slide? And this is what you'll see is we'll be asking a few questions in a later section of this project. We're going to work on these boards together as we in this workshop today. I'm going to turn over the presentation to Heba at this point. Hey, Heba.
Thanks, Brian. Good evening, everyone. Heba El-Gawij, Associate Director of Neighborhood Planning. So I'm going to walk you through boards that speak to the district's workforce and the type of occupations that are present in the district today, and then also how people get around in the district and how they access their jobs. So DC is home to 375,000 workers. The vast majority of these workers, nearly 3/4 of them, are in management, business, science, and arts occupations. The racial makeup of these occupation categories varies significantly, with white residents holding the majority of positions in this first category, while Black and Latino residents hold higher percentages in the field of production, transportation, and material moving and natural resources, construction, and maintenance occupations, respectively. There are also stark disparities across median household income and educational attainment by race. On average, Black households earn 40% of what white households earn and have lower levels of educational attainment. So as we plan for the DC 2050 Comprehensive Plan and a projected 175,000 additional jobs coming to the district, we want to know what type of job you'd like to have in 10 years, even if that is the same job you hold today, and that is the exercise we'll go through in the breakout rooms. We obviously recognize that things are evolving within the federal workforce, and we will continue to monitor these changes as we progress through the planning process. A big part of planning for these new jobs, as well as projected population growth, is access to neighborhood amenities and necessities. These include access to green space, healthcare facilities, groceries, childcare, and entertainment. This series of maps shows access to frequent public transit, which is defined as the percentage of a census tract within either a half-a-mile walk to a metro station or a quarter-mile walk to a high-frequency bus stop. The second map shows the percentage of households with access to a personal vehicle. And then the third map shows access to jobs within a 30-minute commute by either car or transit. Access to frequent public transit and access to a personal vehicle are almost an inverse of one another, as you can see on those two maps, with access to frequent transit being concentrated downtown in the core of the city, while the percent of households with access to a personal vehicle increases as you start to move away from downtown, predominantly in the upper northwest and northeast of the city, quadrants of the city. And the largest number of jobs are accessible from downtown and downtown adjacent neighborhoods, as well as the main transit corridors west of Rock Creek Park. Wards 7 and 8 and parts of Ward 5 have the lowest levels of access to jobs. And we have a series of interactive boards that we will use to ask our participants how you travel from your home to your job, and how long it takes you to access some of the services and amenities that are in your neighborhood or outside of your neighborhood.
Thanks, Heba. I'm going to jump back in here to just do the last station of slides. So we're on to, this will be the fourth station, the climate and community. So as you can see on this map, we have a changing climate. One of the biggest kind of shocks when I came across this data, at least, was we had 34 days of extreme heat in last summer of 2024. We are projected to triple that by 2050. So that means over 100 days where it is dangerous to be outside for long periods of time. So that means people with health vulnerabilities, older adults, people with disabilities. That is a really critical threat that we need to make sure that we're planning for and thinking about as we guide the future of the city. We're also anticipated to have 3 additional extreme rain events per year. And so the personal kind of property damage, the flooding that can take place in various neighborhoods, and everything that comes along with extreme rain events and flooding is also something we need to think about when we design public space, when we design our buildings and how our street network works, our sidewalks and everything. And so you can see the map, this map here, I'll zoom in a little bit. On the left is a heat sensitivity and exposure risk map. So this shows a very stark difference between west of Rock Creek and really the rest of the city in risk to extreme heat. This is an overlay, this is an index map that's taking demographic data by census tract as well as health data and overlaying that with surface temperatures by impervious surface cover as well as tree canopy in existing neighborhoods. So looking at kind of the environmental factors that lead to more intense heat in places that are urban heat islands, as well as the health and demographic factors that might lead to more vulnerability of the residents that live in those areas. So you can see the darker red are going to be areas where if it is an extreme heat day, a higher percentage of those residents in those census tracts are going to be at danger and more vulnerable to that extreme heat due to the environment around them and their existing potential chronic conditions that they might have there. You can also see, we can go through more of this in the breakout groups, but there are a number of QR codes that we have of other agencies' plans that really address resilience and climate that we are working closely with as we go into developing policies for DC 2050. We'll be meeting regularly with these agencies using the latest projections and ensuring that our data is all in alignment with the data that they're using. on the climate and communities board, we're going to have 3 engagement activities when we go to breakouts. The first is going to ask for strategies that you'd like to see the district prioritize to address this change in climate. The next 2 are going to address your communities and your neighborhoods, right? And so finding out where you live, whether your long-term plans are to stay there, move to a different neighborhood in the district, or even leave the district, and have some discussion about why you foresee that today, what's driving that decision potentially. And then we'll have a final exercise around thinking about your neighborhood and what types of amenities and what types of services you'd like to see more of, where maybe there aren't any of these things, or there just is an insufficient number, and trying to and placing dots by your ward as to what the missing amenities might be, with an opportunity to add any other ones that are missing from this chart. So with that, that is the end of the overview of the boards. So I think we have a little bit of time for some Q&A in the main room before we end up doing the tutorial for how we'll all navigate this when we go into breakouts. So I'm going to turn it over to Debbie or Ashley to lead the Q&A discussion, I guess.
Sure. Hey, everyone. How are you tonight or this evening? We do have a few questions. I think we can kind of get through these pretty quickly. One of the first questions is, you talked a bit about the damage that zoning has done to communities and the racial and economic segregation that zoning has caused. Is the district required to have district zones, or could the district stop protecting the wealthy in Ward 3 and elsewhere for more dense housing near them?
I'll pick up on this one. The comprehensive plan is for the entire city, and we'll be exploring approaches to meeting our needs together. And their goal is to have approaches that are fair and equitably applied across the entire district.
All right, let's go to this next question. Given that Black communities have been leaving the city, sorry, as you just shared since the 2006 plan, can you share how you and the team will acknowledge the faults of the comp plan that formed the base for DC 2050? And how will we be exploring alternative solutions to limit gentrification and truly advance racial equity?
I'll pick up here as well. So times have changed, right? With the 2006 comprehensive plan was adopted in a really different situation. It was adopted to help us at a time we were recovering from the control board era. We had serious financial problems in the district. And the 2006 comprehensive plan, which is what the last amendment was based on, was responding to those changes. We're in a really different situation today. Housing is less affordable today. We need more housing for families today. Those are areas we're going to be prioritizing looking forward. In addition to that, downtown is changing in really important ways. And we need to make new policies for downtown to make sure that the city works in an equitable way and that we have a strong economy to support the services that enable the district to be an equitable place.
Thank you so much. Is dedicated housing affordable housing?
Yes, dedicated affordable housing is affordable housing. There are different kinds. And I saw there was another question about, is dedicated affordable housing in Ward 8, Section 8 affordable housing? Some is, but a lot of that housing are of other types, particularly low-income housing tax credits, which serve households with slightly higher incomes.
How are these indicators identified? Are there any health indicators added to this analysis besides jobs, public transport, such as a health center?
Nick, do you want to pick up here?
So yeah, health will be a big part of the data that we're looking at as we go through this plan. This is definitely not all the data that OP is looking through, is working with our agencies to coordinate around. We've had a number of calls with the DC Health Agency, and they are partners with us in this effort, and very excited about this work and in integrating health data into the built environment, and how we can think about how we measure the different growth scenarios that we'll talk about later this fall through health metrics and health data. So yes, that is definitely something that we'll have a lot more information to share as we go through the process and present more data on outcomes along the way.
Are you working with DOEE on climate impacts? As I recall, there is a DC strategic plan addressing climate change.
Yes, and that plan's actually linked in that slide or in the board on the climate change data. And so that's Climate Ready DC. There's Keep Cool DC. There's Sustainable DC. DOE is planning away, and we are in lockstep with all of their planning efforts and keeping abreast of everything that they're doing.
Thank you for this panel. Could OP provide more clarity on the status of the comprehensive plan's required anti-displacement strategy? I know it was mentioned that it'll be released later, but can anyone share what work DMPED and OP has done so far to further develop the strategy?
Yep. I can weigh in here. So OP, DMPED, and our partners at the Department of Housing and Community Development have been working together for a number of months now. We've completed the research phase of studying, what best practices to address displacement nationally and understand who faces displacement in the district and how they're likely to face it. We'll be using that information to prepare a strategy that builds on the district's existing programs that we're looking forward to sharing with the public in this fall.
Are you able to share more about your timeline? I'm interested in learning more about when you'll collect input, out plans together, take decisions, etc. Thank you.
Yes, definitely we'll share more about that. We actually have a slide of that at the end of the presentation after we come back from breakouts as part of the next steps. So stay tuned. We will talk about that as we go forward in this meeting.
How does Ward 3 repair affordable housing? Does Ward 3 have more power than DC government?
No, so everyone in the city is working together. Ward 3 does have less dedicated affordable housing than any other ward in the district. However, district government has been working since the last comprehensive plan to increase affordable housing in Ward 3. That does take time. The district does have a number of incentives to increase affordable housing in places where it's less common today. And we will be working to continue that effort to make sure that we have affordable housing across the city.
What is the timeline for the RA1 zoning amendment? How does this factor into DC 2050?
That's a really good question. The team who's leading the comprehensive plan is a different team that leads our zoning work. I don't have that specific question. If you could send us your contact information, we can follow up.
We're experiencing an incredibly volatile period of change right now because of drastic cuts to federal government under the current administration. When we reviewed demographics, workforce, it stood out that so much is changing in 2025. It may be hard to predict demographics and needs of DC in the future. Will this planning process allow for adaptation?
Yes, this planning process is specifically designed to help the district adapt through a period of historic uncertainty. So, yes, we are using our forecast for how the district is likely to grow because those forecasts do assume periods of growth and periods of contraction. That being said, we are very aware that we are going through a profound change. We're studying it as it comes. We're working to understand how it's going to affect the city as it grows. But frankly, there's a lot more unknowns than knowns right now. And so what we're doing is we're taking the opportunity to say, what is our policy for downtown? What do we want downtown to look like? What do we need from our housing? And what are our opportunities to get it? In a lot of ways, we know that finding homes for families is a challenge. We know that downtown is changing a whole lot. Those are the things we know. And so we're using those grounding points to help guide our policy towards the future.
You only touched on a bit of economic development. Do you have more details on how commercial corridors and the bids play into this plan?
Nick, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, so we, as part of this planning effort, we are engaging with a number of different stakeholders. As we prepared for the public launch, we met with a number of community-based organizations, including BIDS, Main Streets, other nonprofits. They are critical to this effort and will continue to be trusted partners as we go forward in hearing the concerns that they're raising from different areas and also meeting with our small and local business. We are one of our agencies that we meet with regularly is the Department of Small and Local Business. And so talking about like local retail and opportunities for jobs along corridors and creating that vibrant local economy is something that we'll have deeper conversations on as we get more into the other phases of this process.
Are we coordinating our plan with Virginia and Maryland? Is there a regional approach?
That's a really good question. We work with Virginia and Maryland after we complete the comprehensive plan. The District of Columbia is a member of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, where jurisdictions from across the region share their plans for how they expect to grow and coordinate the plan for transportation, environmental systems, and other shared needs across the region.
Thanks to all of OP. This has been great. How are you thinking about transit-oriented development? Many neighborhoods in DC have land zones for single-family housing within 100 feet of a metro stop. Has there been thought to upzoning areas within certain metro bus walk sheds? Example, half a mile from a metro stop, fourth a mile from a high-frequency bus stop?
That's a good question.
Yep.
Transit is a really important part of life in the district, and we expect it to be continuing to the future. We look forward to having conversations about how we can continue to grow and evolve around our transportation system, and that's going to be a really important part of this process.
Okay, so we have another question, and guys, feel free. I think we have a few more minutes, so if you want to drop questions in, we can try to hurry up and ask them before we move on. Has this team read the DC Auditor's report on inclusionary zoning? The report shows how IZ does not work, and it is the primary basis on which OP and DEMPED build affordable housing. How would we as residents provide input based on research that shows what hasn't been working?
So yes, a number of us have reviewed the auditor's report. Then it does raise some serious issues that the administration is working on very carefully. However, I think that the report does show a lot of successes as well. The auditor's report has shown that we've been able to create nearly 3,000 units of dedicated affordable housing. The report did show that there's a need to improve the administration of the program, and it was very helpful in diagnosing the ways to prove that. I'm personally looking forward to seeing how those improvements are made and improving our affordable housing system across the city. That being said, inclusionary zoning is not our only tool. It's one of many. Inclusionary zoning doesn't meet the needs of every resident, but it does serve an important need.
Do you have any information on how the replacement population impact on housing needs? For example, do we need to know what the population might look like if we only look at people born and raised in DC?
That's a really good question. There are a lot of different lived experiences, and that's really why why we conduct this planning process, because there's only so much we can learn from census data and other sources. That's why we want to start by listening, and that's what we're doing here today. We're in the listening phase of the planning process, and as we go through, we'll start working to build consensus together. And we want to hear about your lived experience specifically to make sure that we're understanding our residents' experiences.
Will there be space during this call to discuss how to shelter the unhoused residents of our city besides affordable housing?
Meeting the needs of all of our residents is important. We want to make sure that services and housing match up. We look forward to having those conversations. The comprehensive plan can play a very big role in meeting the needs of people who are unhoused, but it's also in partnership with our program. So there are some things the comprehensive plan can do, but it can't do all of it. And we work very closely with the Interagency Council on Homelessness to help strike that balance.
Would you consider having focus groups or engagement groups with younger residents?
Nick, do you want to pick up here?
Yeah, sure. Youth is definitely a group that we're looking to engage, and we are trying to be at various events, which are going to draw a crowd for youth, as well as partner with organizations that have kind of outreach arms that are trusted ambassadors to various communities, such as young people, that we can engage in this process because this is their future, right? We're planning for 2050, and they're going to be the adults leading the workforce at that point in time. So we definitely want to engage the youth. So if you have ideas, we're all ears.
So the next question, I'm just going to summarize just a bit because we're getting there on time, and I want to try to get through the other folks' questions as well. But it's asking about other case studies and if we've looked at other case studies in other jurisdictions. A specific mention of Chicago was mentioned, and I wanted to see if you had any comment about that.
Yeah. We've reviewed planning processes from more than 20 jurisdictions across the country, including Chicago. We're really excited. Heba, do you want to say a little bit here?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, like Ryan said, we looked at a lot of jurisdictions in similar and different scale to DC. Just looking at it from kind of how the comprehensive planning practice has evolved over the last 10 years. Generally, what tools are being used by these jurisdictions? How are they structuring their documents? How are they addressing the policies and to what level of detail? So these are all things that we looked into with these jurisdictions, and particularly comprehensive plans that have been adopted across the country within the last 10 years. So yes, definitely Chicago, Denver, Charlotte, Memphis, San Antonio, Dallas. We looked at so many of them, and we've had conversations with a lot of the planners within these departments and agencies as well. So we're bringing a lot of that knowledge and a lot of that leading practice evolution into this planning process.
The next question is asking about our older residents, and if we're going to ensure that we keep their needs and interests in mind, because they are a bit different from our younger households.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that question. That's a great question. That's definitely something that we're thinking about a lot as we talk about diverse types of housing, making sure that we're building housing not only for families with young kids, but also as we age and age in place, right? People want to stay in their communities many times, and sometimes that becomes difficult to do in certain types of housing. So you might want to downsize, you might want more accessible housing. It's also very relevant to kind of a conversation around how accessible is everything in your community, right? Are there safe and accessible ways to get groceries and to go to the pharmacy and to go to a park and hang out? Are there neighbors that you know? Are there third spaces where you can connect? So that's a big part of kind of what we're thinking about, making sure that at any age, people can, you can be born here, you can grow up here, you can start a family here, you can retire here, all of the phases of life.
So Nick, you kind of just touched on this next question, but I just wanted to see if there was actually any emphasis that might be placed on senior housing that you may be aware of as part of this process.
Yeah, so I think we're going to talk about all types of housing, right? That's part of housing diversity, is thinking about, whether a housing is income restricted or age restricted, or whether it is multi-generational and has accessible, zero entry, or it's a place where you can have an ADU to provide for an in-law to stay with you, or it's a larger unit where you can have grandparents move in. I think we're looking at all types of options because people have different choices that they want to pursue. So we want to provide that choice for everyone.
When you talk about expected new residents, is that accounting for current zoning restrictions? Are there estimates of how many more people would move into DC if zoning weren't artificially constraining housing supply?
Ryan, do you want to talk about the projections from COG at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So the forecast for the homes we need in the district are based on how our population is growing, as well as what is expected from our economy through 2050. We are checking in on those assumptions and making adjustments as we go. There may be some changes in the short term. Over the long term, the district likely will return to its growth.
How has the age in place movement affected the housing situation in DC, especially high turnover?
Sorry, Ashley, I think I missed a word in there, and then I think this is the last question we can take before we need to move on to the next segment.
Okay, I'll just repeat it. How has the age in place movement affected the housing situation in DC, especially high turnover?
I don't see it as an issue. I think that a home is a place that a person lives. It's a very important space. You know, that being said, there are a number of older adults who do have extra bedrooms in their home, and that's something that they may be interested in downsizing, but that's a very personal decision and something that we treat with a lot of respect. So at this point in time, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to share some information about what to expect from the planning process going forward. Megan, are you able to share the slide?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, and I can jump in here and kind of walk through the roadmap. So this is kind of broadly our roadmap of the steps forward. We said we were going to go through this later, but we're doing it now because we have a few minutes before we go into the breakouts, and wanted to make sure everybody understood where we are in the process, where we're headed. So right now we're defining our collective vision together. This will run through this summer. We have a vision survey that's out on our website now. At the end of this meeting, we'll have a QR code. We can link that survey in the chat. It's on our website at dc2050.com. Please check out the project website. There's a lot of resources on there. We'll post these boards from this presentation on there after this workshop concludes. We will also be having some meetings in May and June where we're going to come back. That'll be our next kind of large scale tranche of meetings where we're going to talk about what a complete community means to you, and then start talking about how we can use the various elements of that to create the future land use map that we'll be developing together as we go forward to develop our strategy for future land use in the district. In September, we're going to start conversations around some possible futures about how we might grow, how we might accommodate those additional residents, where that growth would take place, what different strategies might be, and how that would affect different communities across the district. We'll have a series of workshops. We'll have online surveys, both interactive online tools and also in person. We'll be doing a lot of like meeting people where they are as we're engaging in this process. And then after each of these phases, we're going to have an engagement report that is published and shared on our website widely so that you can see what we're hearing, who we've engaged, and kind of how that's informing our next steps. You can go to the next slide, Meg. And so for after we finish talking with you all about those possible futures, we're going to be working to incorporate policies that will guide us to those futures into the actual policies that go into the draft plan. That plan will be released in the fall of 2026. We will then have a very sufficient period of public comment, a nice long time for people to be able to weigh in on the plan, provide your comments. We'll be doing engagement to notify you when that is available and also to kind of walk through how we'll be taking comments at that point in time. And then in June of 2027, we submit the plan to the DC Council. The DC Council then acts on that plan and by holding hearings, potentially voting on it and approving it. Once it is approved by the DC Council, it sits with NCPC, the National Capital Planning Commission, for 60 days. They vote to approve it, and then it goes to the US Congress, where it sits for 30 days, and if there is no action, it is approved. And that's when it becomes law, and we begin implementing that, which we are anticipating will be roughly at the start of 2028. And then that will guide us through to the future, and we'll work with all the other agencies within government because the plan will guide their capital expenditures, their spending, their strategies and policies as we move forward, and the strategies and policies within the plans that they put out to kind of help implement the comprehensive plan. And so with that, I think we are at the stage where we are going to kick it over to Molly from Brick and Story, who's going to walk us through how we're going to use the boards in our breakouts and start getting people familiar with this mural digital whiteboard.
So everyone else will have about 35 seconds to get ripped back into the main room. But hopefully the conversations folks were having were fruitful. We've been having a chat, a focus group out in the main room for folks with technical troubles getting into the breakout room. So it's been a nice conversation.
That's good. Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Well, it looks like people are back. Yeah.
All right, I think we are all back in the main room. Welcome back, everybody. I will pass it over to another teammate to close us out with next steps.
Yeah, sure. I can close this out. So I think at least in my group, we had a really great discussion. Thanks to everybody for participating in the conversation this evening. It was really, really great to hear from everybody. Hopefully all the rooms were as engaged and fruitful as we were in room 3. We do have some next steps for you as we go forward. As we mentioned, this is just the start of our process. We have a lot more engagement to go, and we will make sure that you're aware of all the other opportunities to participate in this process. One of the big ones right now is to take the DC 2050 Vision Survey, which you can actually scan that QR code on the lower left of the screen, and that'll take you right to the survey so that you can take it. You could also go to dc2050.com. And you can, it'll pop up right there as you enter the website as well. Encourage you to watch the video. We have a very cool video on our website explaining what the comprehensive plan is with a lot of images and information about DC. And if you haven't already, sign up for your newsletter. Your emails will get added to the newsletter from signing up for this meeting, but encourage your friends, your neighbors, others in your community to sign up. And if you have any further questions or comments after the meeting, please email us at dc2050@dc.gov. As I mentioned before, we're going to post all of the boards from this meeting on the website. Just to give us a couple days for that. You should see that definitely by next week. We'll have all the boards, and you can peruse the data then at your leisure. I also want to note that on the website there is a contact us form, and as we've mentioned a lot, we really want to hear from community groups, meet people where they are, hear from residents in every community. And so if you are a part of a community group, an ANC commissioner, or just a collection of neighbors who want to meet with Office of Planning about a particular topic, please fill out the Contact Us form. There's an option to request a meeting or to invite OP to one of your meetings, and then OP staff can get in touch with you that way to schedule that. So again, I just want to, maybe I'll turn it over to Director Cozart if you want to close us out, but thank you.
Sure, I'll just take a little moment of personal privilege. If folks, we're actively trying to get the word out about this survey, and so if folks would indulge, if you would put, kind of raise your hand virtually if you have filled out the survey or at least heard of the survey. You are quite a constituency of folks who've spent almost 2 hours with us. So, okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm seeing some raised hands. If we need to bring you some paper versions, something like that, please email us at dc2050.dc@dc.gov and we'll get that to you. If you're connected with some folks who will fill out the survey because they're interested in it, but they just haven't heard about it yet, please contact us and we'll work with you to get that out there. But really appreciate people's time, especially at a really, I'll just use the word interesting, a really interesting moment we find ourselves in. We have spring, it's cherry blossom time, it's Women's History Month, it's all kinds of things. And there are all kinds of challenges that people are facing individually, collectively, and globally, right? So we really appreciate you bringing that and helping us think about today as well as the future. And just shout out to the wonderful OP team. We are small but mighty and very open to ideas and partnering. So please feel free to reach out to us with your ideas following this meeting. So thanks so much. And I guess, Nick, can I say with that, we're adjourned? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you again and have a good and safe evening.